Welcome to Dangerous Policy. I'm Charlene.
I'm Crispin.
And this is our Week in Review. Dangerous Policy is a channel aimed at intelligent people. We discuss important issues facing life and society. But before we begin, how has your week been, Crispin?
Excellent, actually. Pretty good. Well, it's actually funny you should say that. Well, ask that question. I know you ask the same question every week.
Why not?
But I was going to say that in Australia and the US and Britain and places like that, if you ask someone, "Oh, how are you?" the answer is always good.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Or not bad, or pretty good, or whatever. Whereas, like a lot of places around the world, Eastern Europe included, if you ask someone how they are, sort of in Russian, sort of как дела or something, they might answer, хорошо, good, but like often they'll give you an honest answer, like how it's a sincere question. Whereas in the West, it's sort of a social grace. It's a hello. But I am genuinely good. The week has been, impressive. We're still very much in winter. Australia is unfortunately in massive lockdowns all across the country with wild new restrictions, so that hasn't been so great. But personally, I've been fine. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah. Well. Funny enough, right? I was reflecting on dangerous policy recently. I facilitated a panel discussion. And I was super nervous about it in terms of like preparation. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's going to be a crowd. What if I stuff up? And what if someone takes over? Like, I was Googling how to run a good panel discussion. What are the do's and don'ts? And just like preparing my questions, being over prepared. And then what struck me. Once I sat down and started the facilitation, I just hit the ground running. It was super easy and I was very calm, which made me reflect on just how much being part of this channel and running a YouTube channel has elevated my presentation skills and public speaking skills, which I did not expect. It kind of took me by surprise in terms of, being able to think quick on the spot because, fun enough, I mean, you do prepare a little bit, but I don't for a lot of these videos. So it requires a lot of improvisation as I go. But on the reflection, has there been any skills that you've acquired since?
Well, yes, but before I answer the question, just following on from the point you made, I think the relationship with the camera changes over time. Okay, so
what do you mean?
When we first started this, talking into a camera was extremely weird and unnatural, right?
Oh, like it's so weird.
You're sort of talking to yourself. You don't really know how it's coming across, even if you can see the little like pictures or whatever. Like it's so weird. You really feel you're not even talking to a mirror. It's like there's a little black box,
and you feel more self-conscious. I think in the beginning, like I felt more self-conscious.
Yeah, exactly. Like you say a word, you're suddenly thinking about what you're saying as you're saying it, which of course trips you up. But over time, as the YouTube channel has evolved, as we've actually developed a proper audience, talking into the camera really feels like talking to people because we realize that this is a medium through which we are exchanging our ideas and conveying information, and much like you would just on a normal Skype call or a Zoom call. And that has made the whole thing seem more natural. And I would presuppose for what you've just said that when you're talking into a camera now, it does feel more like public speaking, right? You are actually talking to an auditorium of people or a lecture theatre of people, and they are interested in what you're saying, like a sort of TED talk. So when you're facilitating a panel discussion, those skills are immediately transferable. But way back in the beginning, they did not seem to align at all.
Not at all. No.
So it doesn't surprise me that your presentation has become more pronounced as a consequence.
And also, again, because of COVID era, we're all kind of moving online. So there's a lot of Zoom calls that happen more often. And I feel, I'm more conscious of the space and the camera and how it looks before I more jump on the calls. Like, is there good lighting? Is the audio okay? Things that, I don't know, some people might take for granted. Oh yeah, this looks all right, and like move on.
Yes.
I'm way pickier.
Yes, our tolerance for those sorts of things is wildly diminished. As you know, I mean, and I remember this. I went and saw a piano recital. Someone played Rachmaninoff at the university recital, and they thought they had done terribly, and everyone thought they had done amazingly, but they were kicking themselves or like hitting the wall. And we're like, what's wrong? And she's like, well, you know, I stuffed up this note and this note and this note, and like nobody noticed, right?
Yeah.
0 people noticed. Even people who, you know, like music just did not get it. And because once you're attuned to what's good lighting, bad lighting, good sound, bad sound, your tolerance for mess ups becomes greatly diminished. But no, to answer your question, most of the skills that I feel have been developed for me that surprised me, like obviously camera presence and all that, but mostly the back end technical side. So getting the sound to sound like someone talking that they're willing to tolerate when they're sitting there in the YouTube, like browsing the internet. People have no time for bad sound. I certainly don't. So using Adobe products or Adobe Audition, how to make sure that you get to, and then if something is wrong, like how to edit it, and then Photoshop. So the thumbnails, a lot of the work goes into just the thumbnails that you click on, and you will notice as you look back over the channel how the thumbnails have evolved and have continued to evolve. Like I have the next stage of thumbnail development that I'm thinking about now, which it never entered my mind that would be something I would have to think about when making a YouTube channel, is how to present each video online. So very simple things. How to work to deadlines. I mean, obviously that's not a skill unique to YouTube, but you know, Charlene and I have a kind of a working groove of like, you know, someone does A, which allows the other person to do B, which allows the other person to do C. And so we need to have that kind of got rolling forward. Other skills, how to facilitate good discussion in the YouTube comments. Like there is an art form to developing a YouTube community that is not what people, you know, expect. You have to engage with the audience, and you have to encourage the audience to engage with each other in order to build the brand, because that's the YouTube channel isn't just a channel. Like we're Dangerous Policy. We do have ambitions for beyond just this channel, and that requires a certain respectability of the brand. And so thinking about each video in its broader context. The other skill is the algorithm. My goodness, so YouTube really pushes us in certain directions.
Of course they push us to celebrities.
They push us to celebrities, but they push us to niche topics, and they want to reach audiences that are not presently engaged, right? So YouTube has really nailed its market, kind of how to actually so building a channel in 2021, it requires a certain negotiation with the algorithm. Like we could be much bigger than we are right now if we only built content that the algorithm wanted us to make, right? Yeah. Because then the algorithm would snowball and would seek, like, you know, exponentially seek to expand our content and display it for others to try and get people who are not currently watching a lot of YouTube to watch more. Whereas we have to negotiate that with us as creators and the sort of work that we think will be interesting and actually add value. I mean, you know, I love doing the top 10 lists and the top 5 lists of various things, but I wouldn't want to do the same list over and over again. So for example, we did a video on top 10 Australian cities ranked. And there's a few other Australian things that I would like to rank.
But people love these top 10, especially if it's about like their own country.
No, nothing wrong with that, right? Nothing wrong with that. But what I'm saying is that I wouldn't want to do like top 10 Australian cities, then top 10 Australian animals, then top 10 Australian, like, you know, roads, top 10 Australian car models, like the YouTube algorithm would really support that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But we're a channel aimed at intelligent people wanting to discuss important issues facing life and society. We're not there just as time filler. We want people to be able to think about serious topics, and when they come to our channel, to feel like they're getting a lot of value. So yes, I love doing that stuff, and I will continue to do that stuff, but I'm not going to compromise what we are as a channel just to accommodate the algorithm. But there is a skill in negotiating that, right? It's not like we do have to factor in what YouTube wants, because it's a platform, and if we want to continue to grow, we need to be able to support YouTube's business model, if you like. If we're and this is perfectly reasonable from YouTube's perspective, right? YouTube, if it's only going to promote content that promotes its business, okay? So we need to be able to produce content that assists in that respect, and then it will reward us as creators with more views and more putting our thumbnails in front of more eyeballs and things like that. And so it's a symbiotic relationship. But these are skills that I just never thought of when building a channel, like all of the, let's say, the politics of a YouTube channel.
Yeah. Sorry, I just caught up with the whole we shouldn't be doing all these top 10 videos and stuff, because I can think on the top of my head few channels that just do top 10 blah blah blah, and they do very well.
Yeah.
So
and there's nothing wrong with the top 10 stuff that I've done. I want to do.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah, and it aligns with what we want to do here. So it's not,
But there is a few different types of YouTube channels that are successful. The most common type are those that just hit that same nail over and over again. Okay, we're an astrology channel. Okay, so let's talk about Pisces and the history of Pisces and blah, 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 blah. And then the next video is on okay, what about Pisces with this rising sign? Or what about Pisces with the moon sign? What about Pisces this year? And so you're super specialized, and you just bang on about that topic. And YouTube loves that stuff because it knows that there will be a small group of people
highly engaged
who will just auto click it when it comes up, because it hits that wire and they know what they expect. It's the fast food of YouTube.
But it's also easy to brand yourself, because then you could be basically the top person in that field to go to. If you're thinking astrology, you don't look at number 2, you look at number 1. And if you are the one person that is consistent with astrology, content, I would go for it.
And this is not us bagging out other content creators. There is nothing wrong with that if that is your jam, right? So if you are super interested in cruises and boats, and you want to do a YouTube channel about that, that's great. You be that person. And we want to be that too for things that are of interest to us. So I'm sure that we will become, if not already, we will become the most prominent YouTubers giving an international perspective on Lithuania and the Baltic states and those regions. So outside of that region, from very far away, from kind of a helicopter, from a helicopter view of what's going on in politically, internationally, strategically in that part of the world, right, as part of our broader channel discussing global issues. But because that is something that we have a particular interest in, and therefore we will continue to create content for that, and YouTube recognizing that is an underserviced area will reward that. So that's where the negotiation comes in. It's okay, well, I would like to produce more Baltic content because that's stuff I would like to do, but I'm not willing to do it just to feed the algorithm. I want the audience to, when they watch a video, feel like they're getting some new information. And we're not the fast food of YouTube. We're not the thing. I mean, what makes McDonald's successful, or has? I mean, it's changing now, but what made it successful in the past wasn't that it made the best burgers or the best fries. It's just that it made it consistently. Wherever you were in the world, if you walked into a McDonald's and you asked for a Big Mac and fries, you knew exactly the garbage you were about to receive, right? And so...
Plus it was super convenient too.
Super convenient. And that's what YouTube does. It hits into that part of the brain of the viewer which just wants that instant dopamine reward mechanism and wants to get that same bit of 10 minutes of service, whereas we're not that. We are like, yes, we have consistency and standards and people will know what to expect from us, but they should be given information and things to think about that they take away from each video. That it's not just, they've forgotten what they've seen the moment the video ends.
I agree.
That they actually go away and they think about it. They might, angrily disagree. They might think, but it's something that they will have to take with them for the day. Whereas, most of YouTube is not that. There's how-to videos.
Which very useful, how to tie a tie, like best video.
So those videos are essential, right? But they don't tend to have, unless you're actually in the field, they don't tend to get many subscribers. They get millions of views.
Yes.
But let's say you have a YouTube channel on how to fix your car, right? Most people don't know how to do that. So really useful information, okay? And that will be like if you're a mechanic and you make YouTube videos. Well, if you are a mechanic, you'll probably subscribe to this because there'll be little bits and pieces you pick up here and there that'll improve you as a mechanic because there'll be things you don't know about particular engine types and car models and things that the channel will instruct you on. But for the vast majority of viewers, they're like, how do I change my battery? They go and they look up, how do I change my battery? They get that information done. They know how to change the battery. They never go back to that channel again. So there is all of this going on. And YouTube is and I know we've moved well beyond skills now, but YouTube as a business has an interlocking relationship between advertisers, creators, and audience members. And navigating that in a way that is consistent with our brand is our perennial challenge. Like I feel very confident in our success to date. People make the point like we're a small channel, you should have a lot more views, blah, blah, blah. And I look, totally support that. Want more views, want more subs, and please subscribe if you haven't already. But I do feel that we could have gone full metal jacket on the subs and the views and the likes and the engagement and built that, but we would have lost that audience as we moved into the stuff that we really want to talk about.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. A bit sidetracked, but that's okay. Interesting stuff, I guess, for those who consider starting a YouTube channel, especially something that's political and commentary, which I think is rising. Actually, that's a niche that's rising. It's just commentary on the news and social issues nowadays because people can't trust the media in general. I can't trust it for a balanced opinion.
Well, that's a powerful point. And one thing that I think we still need to do for our channel that we haven't quite settled on is what is the specific political audience that we want to attract? Like, like at the moment, we've been thinking, okay, the vast majority of people out there, if they had more time, because they're busy with their lives, right? If they had more time, they would be able to get engaged in particular issues. And our channel services those people, right? Like they get enough of an overview of a particular issue, whether it's like the Iranian nuclear program or what's happening with North Korea or what's happening in Belarus. So that they get an in-depth discussion, not just that 2-minute soundbite they'll get in the news with whatever slant that they want, without having to become subject matter experts themselves. If someone is talking about this sort of stuff in their circles, they will know enough to be able to engage and discuss, right? That's the kind of level we're pitched at. But the vast majority of political commentary online, and in YouTube in particular, is aimed at a specific political leaning, right? So Ben Shapiro, massive channel, daily call, employs dozens, if not hundreds of people in Tennessee. Of course, he is a right-wing commentator talking to conservatives with a conservative mindset and a conservative following. And that's what his brand is. Then you've got people like Kyle Kulinski, who are aimed at specifically those kind of college-educated lefties who were the Bernie Sanders supporters of the previous sort of elections and so on, and just hammers away at that. You've got the Jimmy Dore types who are comedians and they kind of just laugh at the whole political process. So they've got these followings. People look at me and they go, "Oh, he's right of center," and I'm pretty centrist, right? I mean, it's weird because the left is going further and further left. It makes me look further right than I am. But I have both left and right opinions. So, for example, on the right, I'm fairly conservative on crime. I believe in freedom of speech, sovereignty of the individual, classic liberty. I think that personal rights and freedoms should only be circumscribed under specific criteria. And then on the authoritarian liberty paradigm, which I discussed in a recent video, I'm clearly on the liberty side, right? That I think that the government has limited power to dominate and control the citizens. It should be the service and provider of services, not the ruler, right?
Right.
So on all of that, you would say that that's classic conservative liberty stuff.
Yeah.
But on the other side, I believe in enfranchising the large maximum group of the individuals. So universal healthcare, progressive taxation, minimum wages, universal education, the ability to realize your actual achievements, not based on where you've come from or your background or whatever, but just on your ability and your predilections and your interests, and to have a social safety net that facilitates and enables that. That's all traditional classic Labor left kind of stuff, right? And if they still talked about that, so for example, I put out a quote the other day. I was thinking of UK Labor, right, as opposed to Australian Labor, the similar parties. The UK Labor, 1991. We believe in workers' rights, minimum wages, and protecting families through improved job security, right? That's okay.
Yeah.
So workers, families, job security. That can speak to the average person, right?
Yeah.
Labor in 2021. Your 4-year-old can change their sex without parental consent and get puberty blockers and undergo operations. And if you're not, you're a transphobic bigot. Okay.
That's it.
It's a less appealing message, okay?
That's a bit.
So that's why I appear to be more right-leaning. And I do get on better with right-leaning types because they still have the ability, generally speaking, except for the extremes, of course, to have a dialogue about specific things. Like I can have a discussion about, let's say, taxation with someone on the right who believes that there should be no minimum wage and tax is theft. Okay, but we want these. Well, look, that's a philosophically cohesive worldview, but I would say that it's suboptimal for the distribution and allocation of resources within a modern nation state, right? And I would have that discussion with them without the emotional kind of fire behind it. Just be like, we both want the same things. We want the best outcomes.
Yeah.
So what's the best? But if I have that discussion with the left, if I say, oh, look, there is a point at which taxation becomes a real disincentive for investment and job growth and creation of new industries.
We should be taxing the billionaires, Crispin.
Exactly what I was going to say. It's the billionaires ruling society. Okay, but no, taxing the billionaires more isn't the solution to all of our problems. There's a deeper question around this, you just want to support the rich. I'm like, well, I want everybody to be rich, right?
Technically, you can have this conversation. You're probably really rich, in comparison to the rest of the world.
Well, this is where people get it wrong, right? The people that are most anti-rich are not the people who are massively poor. It's the people who are kind of your inner city, highly educated types that have been told from early childhood that they're special. And if they don't realize all of their hopes and dreams, they find someone slightly further up the distribution curve to blame for all of the society's ills. So the vast majority of people that are like, we hate the billionaires, they would themselves, on a global scale, still be easily in the top 1% of global income earners, right? Like if you're a middle-class income in a Western country, you are way eye-wateringly beyond the vast majority of the human race. And they would look at you with absolute dismay that you're saying that it's all rigged, right? They'd be like, well, yeah, but not towards us. So it's not that they love the poor. It's that they just despise the rich. And I find that to be an extremely distasteful worldview. I had this discussion, and I'm sure I've discussed this in videos before. I believe that, so one of the most politically toxic things to discuss is a death tax, because it's called death tax, but it's an inheritance tax. If you parents have worked their whole lives and they want to give all of their wealth to their children, should the state take a piece out of it in order to make people on a more level playing field in terms of being able to compete? Now, I consider that to be a conservative idea. Conservatives hate it, but I consider it to be a conservative idea that what you want is equal opportunity, not equal outcome. Now, if you have a wealth transfer where you have a billionaire parent who gives you $1 billion, right? Well, you haven't done anything to add value to the society, and there is nothing that suggests that you have the ability or the temperament to allocate that level of capital. Okay, so is a inheritance tax appropriate? Well, I can also see why people are totally against it, because a lot of these billionaires in particular would say, we created this wealth and the governments aren't very good at spending it, right? If we had greater faith that the money was going to be used the way we would use it, i.e. efficiently, then...
Not in Afghanistan.
Great point. And we'll get onto that subject. But, and we're hitting the time as well. But so as at that point, so here's my solution.
Right.
Tell the billionaires, say, look, before you die, you can avoid this tax entirely if you yourself spend 30% of your wealth on a charitable cause within the country that we approve. And you can control the organization and the allocation of funds. And that way you can use all of your abilities that have allowed you to accumulate this wealth and allocate and distribute that for the broader public good. And I think that would get a lot more buy-in from the billionaires themselves, because it wouldn't be like us versus them. It'd be like, one day I'm going to get rich enough that I can actually give back to the community in the way that I would choose to give back, and everyone will understand my contribution to that society. So
I think ultimately people do want to change the world, like, and make an impact, you know, and I think being able to be a decision maker in that process instead of, you know, oh, we're going to take this amount of money and that's it. You know, being a big shared decision maker is a very powerful and strategic move. It makes more sense.
And you achieve all of the public policy outcomes. So you make it more equal intergenerationally to allow people to succeed on their merits. You solve community problems that these people with enormous organizational abilities can do. You remove the politics of envy from it, because they become contributors and benefactors of the whole society. So they become, instead of people that people hate on, people that people want to be and aspire to be. And you don't have the resentment from the wealthy people, because they're not having their money stolen from them. They're being encouraged to support the broader good under their own control and their own auspices. I think this is just a solution that we should all move towards. But having these kinds of discussions in the present tribal political environment is very hard.
It is impossible. So speaking of misusing funds, Afghanistan and the US, I really underestimated how much money the US had invested into Afghanistan. It's shocking, you know, and it's also makes me wonder, you did a video about the Taliban and the fact that the US is pulling troops out of Afghanistan. I do this habit, I just jump to a topic with no background. But the Taliban have obviously are making moves in Afghanistan to take over, since President Biden has decided to move troops out
Mm-hmm.
of Afghanistan, which is what it is.
It's not a decision the decision to withdraw from Afghanistan is a good one. It should have been done many years ago.
But like the way in which it was carried out is obviously where it falls a bit. And I guess, what are the implications? That's what I want to know. Is the implications of the Taliban completely taking over Afghanistan? Because it's going to happen. But like, what's the implications on a global scale?
Okay, well, on the positive side of the ledger, there are some silver linings. Okay, and they should be mentioned. The massive drug trade that is currently flowing into Russia, flowing into the European Union, will be curtailed because the Taliban, as I said in the video, for all of their extraordinarily dark repressions, they despise drugs and narcotics, and they will clamp down on drug traffickers brutally.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a positive. Another positive is that this defeat will be so bitter for the United States, so distasteful, that it will discourage for generations to come any misadventure in the Middle East at all. It may well cause the United States to properly and permanently refocus its strategic attention to where it's needed, which is Asia and the rise of China, and realize that it has no enduring interest in the Middle East such as sufficient that would cause it to do something like this again. That could just be a vain hope, and there are things that could easily drag the United States back in. So Iran's nuclear program being top of that list, where the US just can't afford to ignore it. Mm-hmm. The other benefit would be that Afghanistan becomes an ulcer for somebody else, ultimately. So historically, major powers have sought to ingratiate itself or take over Afghanistan. So originally the British, then the Soviet Union, then the United States. I'm sure that the Chinese, the Iranians, others will be putting their hands together, licking their lips over, the possibilities and opportunities of Afghanistan, of which there are many. But whether or not they learn the lessons of the past, given how fiercely independent these Taliban are, things could go wrong for them, right? Yeah. They could be like, for example, the Chinese could, invest in some major infrastructure project in Afghanistan for their Belt and Road Initiative. It becomes subject to local terrorist attacks. They put in, security to try and support it. That creates more animosity in the local community, and these things sort of snowball. There is possibilities that it could become a problem for America's enemies, and that would be a positive.
Well, is there benefit in investing in Afghanistan? I'm just missing something.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, Afghanistan is a very remote kind of backwater. I think in terms of transportation, there's a lot, like it's geographically on a crossroads, very much part of the old Silk Road.
Yeah.
And so, having rail lines and pipelines and things like that running through it could be very profitable for the major powers. But whether or not
unless
investing
it's dug up.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they're vulnerable, but unless they're, I'm not sure what really in Afghanistan. I mean, there's a lot of tin, there's a lot of lapis and things like that, like some precious, stones and things. But whether or not it's worth the strategic mess, I'm not sure. I think it's not like it's covered in oil fields and things like that where everyone's going to race in. But it does have a certain crossroads between different places, sorts of nexus.
Yeah.
But this is really pulling at threads here, and all of these silver linings are with like America being defeated. The negatives are so much greater. So, for example, the Taliban itself, just on a pure humanitarian level, is the worst of the worst regimes. And there is a habit within the Middle East, particularly in Islamic movements, where they start out as militant groups that are supported by various factions. And remember, the Mujahideen in the 1980s were supported by the US itself and trained and equipped by the CIA for very good reasons at the time.
Yeah.
But they end up taking over. And then within those groups, it's always the most extreme, like, ideologically possessed groups that take power, because they're the ones with the cohesive philosophy. They're the ones that can bring order and structure and have a clear idea of what they want, rather than just power or some kind of sort of unknowable ideology or value, like liberty, that various people have different conceptions of. Whereas if you say, we're going to implement Sharia, well, that's written down, codified. There are imams that can kind of speak to it.
Yeah.
And people are like, okay, we all understand what this is and how we interact with one another on that basis.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a sort of an ethnogenesis aspect to this. Like if you talk about, Australians, right, or Americans or Lithuanians or whoever, if someone introduces themselves to you as an Australian, there's a whole lot of things that come with that allows you to have a trusting interaction with that person. You know that they have a certain set of values, that they identify in a certain way, that they have certain rituals of interaction that you're aware of, and you can have a high trust interaction with that person, even if you don't know them, so you can conduct commerce and buy and sell things and so on.
Yeah.
And you have to get really unlucky for that to become a problem, right? Whereas in a place like Afghanistan, which is tribal, like the whole of the Middle East, where you've got different factions and groups that hate each other and long-running animosities and so on, to be able to say, I'm Taliban, you're Taliban, even if we don't know each other, even if we're from different tribes, we can have an interaction that allows us to just buy and sell something, right? With a mutual understanding of how this all works. That has a lot of currency in a place like that. So just having a clear ideology is something that everybody who can relate to. You don't need to have personal family blood ties to understand.
So do you think that's why it was so long lasting then? The Taliban was just sitting quietly and preparing.
Well, the Taliban clearly had a strategy. They knew the Americans were war weary. They knew that if they dialed back their attacks, if they slowed down their assaults, the American public back home would believe that the Taliban were defeated, that they had reached some kind of, if not perfect outcome of Afghanistan, something that was relatively stable, that the Afghan government would continue to survive, and that the Americans could withdraw with honor, because they had established a working nation state. Not perfect, not a wonderful liberal democracy without corruption and all that sort of stuff, but at least a functioning country.
Yeah. On drugs, no.
Yeah, on drugs, but where the Taliban would not return. And the day that they start pulling out, the Taliban are like, all right, time to take over. And they just wiped the Afghans, like, wall to wall. So their strategy was superior. It was a superior military strategy, and the Americans were defeated militarily. I mean, it's not, yes, it wasn't like a major battle where the Americans were defeated by a conventional force, right? But strategically, they were outfoxed. I mean, I remember there's a wonderful quote by, I think it could have been Robert McNamara, but I think it was a US general in Vietnam.
But why did they get it so wrong? Sorry, I'll interrupt you after you say that quote.
Yep. So in Vietnam, where he spoke, this was like 20 years after the war had ended, and he was speaking to a senior Viet Cong commander. It might have been, it was probably even Ho Chi Minh. And Ho Chi Minh was like, you were defeated. We defeated you. You lost, right? And the military commander was incredulous at this suggestion. It's like, we never had a military defeat at the hands of the Viet Cong in the entire Vietnam War. Now, it's kind of an exaggeration, but not by much, right? And Ho Chi Minh was like, yes, that is true. It's also irrelevant. Right? And it's a really beautiful insight into the nature of war. the real Clausewitzian sense that war is politics by other means, unless you can affect your will on like why you went into war in the first place, unless that outcome is achieved, you have lost, right? Particularly given the blood and treasure you expend in that objective. So yes, the Americans were defeated and the Taliban were victorious. There's just no other way to write that history.
Yeah, no, I guess that kind of answers my question of like how they got it so wrong. Like, I thought we pay these people thousands and thousands of dollars to be really strategic and study Afghanistan. Like, is it hard to study? Is it because it's just been going on for so long? And
well, I'll do a video about this, not about why they got it so wrong specifically, but I'll use this as an example. But what you touch on is a philosophical point, okay? In our conception of the world, we tend to separate morality from Machiavellian pragmatism, right? Like we sort of see as politics as amoral. So people will say, we fought the Taliban and we thought we would win because the Taliban are evil and repressive and everybody has a yearning for freedom and liberty and hope for the future and the promise of their children, right? So they thought they would win because they were the good guys fighting the bad guys, okay?
Right.
And people would say, no, but you don't have any strategic awareness. Like, you think you're the good guys, but are you perceived as the good guys by all the actors involved? What do they consider to be good and bad? What's the actual structures, the power centers of the society in which you are trying to inject yourself? Do you have a comprehensive plan of success?
And
benchmarks of achieving that?
Yeah.
Ways to know that you're not progressing along that journey the way you would hope to be progressing? Ways of course correcting, a plan for withdrawal, all of these things that are practical. And people separate this. So you have this political kind of like, we're going to save the world. And we have this functional, nitty-gritty, almost compromising set of virtues such as planning and strategy, okay? And this is just Crispin speaking, I would say that you, at the strategic level, at the political grand, like looking at the global map level, cannot separate morality from strategy. It is a moral failing to not think strategically. And this is why I condemn those in charge of the Libya intervention, all of whom are back recycled in the Biden administration. So Samantha Power, top of that list, but many others as well, where they said, well, Gaddafi is an evil man, so we are going to support his overthrow in Libya. Totally divorced from why Gaddafi was successfully in power, how he was rehabilitating himself in the international community, and what benefits the rest of the community were deriving from that. So him giving up his nuclear program, his chemical weapons, his biological weapons, all of that stuff. No idea of the people that they were supporting, who turned out to be totally the worst kind of Islamists. They went and attacked American embassy in Benghazi, killed the US ambassador. No one are held accountable properly for that disgrace. And then they went on to form ISIS. And now in Tunis, you've got like open slave markets. It's a disaster. And I would say that the failure to willingness to employ military force to go and blow up another country, to completely upend that society and inject yourself as like evangel kind of angels from God, without thinking through these things is a moral failing that is totally unforgivable. So people separate virtue from strategy, and I do not. All right. I think that it is a mandatory to be a good person as a military adventurer. You have to have good answers to all of these questions. You don't have to be right about everything, but you do need to have good answers to all these questions. I mean, a great example that everybody is famous case is the US goes into Iraq, and they assumed that everybody would just throw open their arms in celebration and hug them all and kiss them as they came in to overthrow Saddam Hussein. So they come in, and the first thing they do is they go, well, anyone who supported Saddam Hussein, they're no longer part of the future. So we're getting rid of the entire Ba'ath Party. Okay. Every member of the public service at every level in Iraq was a member of the Ba'ath Party as a requirement of being in the public service. So you got rid of all the sewage workers, all the construction workers, all the
hell?
in one go. And I thought, now, I don't know why it happened, but Iraq stopped functioning after this occurred, right? I can't see a cause and effect relationship between, not having the bus drivers take people down the road and then having all of these people who are just ordinary people keeping the country going suddenly feeling completely disaffected and outside of the country scene, also happening to be a Shia majority, and where they would turn.
It was a country that basically got rid of all the Chinese people that ran all the businesses. Then they gave the businesses to the locals, and then it just completely because
and there are many.
There's lots of other examples.
The communism, the collectivization of farms. To say, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to get all the peasants to rise up against the kulaks, and then we're going to redistribute all the land to the peasants. So, okay, you do that. You get rid of these, farmers who know how to actually yield a crop, and give it to people who don't know how to yield a crop. And then everybody starves, and you have mass famine. And, we saw this in Cambodia with the Khmer Rouge as well, the agrarian collectivization, where they got rid of the entire urban class and replaced them all with farmers. So there are different ways to do that, but the results are always the same.
It's just crazy how history just rehashes itself.
Yes, at least with the Americans, and obviously I've been pretty harsh on the United States this week, and President Biden in particular, and rightly so. But at least with the Americans, they mean well. There is something to be said for that, and I know people go, "Oh, they're such hypocrites," and blah blah blah. No. The United States has a weird psychosis, and I say this to all my American viewers and stuff. This is true, right? They have this weird psychosis where Americans deep down in the pits of their soul believe that everyone around the world is secretly an American. Okay? They believe that if you just give everyone the right freedoms, the democracy, the institutions, the rule of law, you too can be an American and live the American dream.
Dun, dun, dun,
Now, there are other countries around the world that realize that that's not true, right?
Yeah, very.
But on balance, it's one of their strengths, right? It leads to some terrible disasters and assumptions about what's going to happen in the Middle East and other parts of the world. But it also makes them quite a restrained superpower. If you think about how mighty the United States, still is, and particularly was during the 1990s, and how a country that didn't care about humanity or human rights and only was interested in itself and had no broader universal ideals of what it meant to be a human being, how dark such a power could be, okay? So people go, oh, America's the West. No, America is the best hegemon we could ever have dreamt of, because they actually believe that every human being around the world has worth. That is a uniquely positive thing about the United States, which doesn't exist in many parts of the world. And in the China moment, we will learn that much to our great cost. So yes, I'm bitterly disappointed in American strategic failures, and they're reaping the consequences of very bad decisions over a long period of time. But I do think that it's a moral failing that they failed to do that. But it's not that they're bad people. So they made bad choices.
Yeah. No, I do agree with that. It's just, obviously they didn't think it through, and mistakes do happen.
Well, but the money is insane. 2.4 trillion.
Yeah, that's what I'm just thinking. Why?
Well, yeah, just imagine the American taxpayer. They if you go to Washington, D.C., there was an escalator in the main train station. that was broken. And I went back a year later and it was still broken, right? In that time, like China had put like 20,000 kilometers of high-speed rail down, right?
Probably built a city as well.
Oh, many. And the United States, if they had spent that money on its infrastructure domestically in the United States, the entire country would be like something out of the Jetsons right now. You'd have Rick and Morty type technologies, like
absolutely.
So unreal. The other thing that really rankled, and it's not just me putting this on the Americans, there's a lot of blame for the Australian government as well here. When people ask the question, for most of those years, I remember Julia Gillard in particular, her voice is ringing in my ears as I say this. Why are we in Afghanistan? What's the strategic impetus? Why are we doing this? And say, well, we're doing it to support little girls going to school, right? This would be their kind of, bring it home, make it personal argument. They'll give like little Malala or whatever is going to school because she's free from the Taliban and can get an education and have hope. Okay, well, that's not what we train special forces to do. And that's not what Hellfire missiles are designed for, right? If we spent 2.4 trillion US dollars on women's education worldwide, where do you think we would be in that area, right? I mean, there would not be a girl around the world who didn't have a master's degree. Okay, like there would, you could utterly transform. So this whole narrative always made me feel sick. I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure that the SAS go and kill people. That's what we ask them to do. That's what they're paid for. They're not standing in a classroom, right? And so, it was always just a bit disturbing, the way in which this war was being sold to the public as some kind of virtue crusade rather than a strategic imperative. Military force should be used to defend the interests of the country that employs it.
So does this offer, I guess, now that US are moving out, does this offer, I guess, new opportunities?
No.
Okay,
it means that the United States will lick its wounds. I remember. I mean, I'm not personally. I wasn't around then, but after Vietnam, the despondency within the United States was very grave. This was when President Jimmy Carter was elected, and this is after Watergate scandal and Richard Nixon and all of that. And America went through, and then you had the oil shocks and the economy started tanking. And America had a real crisis of confidence about its place in the world and whether it was a force for good and whether it could make good strategic choices. And then you had the Iranian hostage situation where all the embassy officials was trapped there for like a year. So everything seemed to be falling apart. And that's when the movie, which, obviously well outside our time period, but the Rambo First Blood movie, the first Rambo film, a fantastic film about a guy who was just a trained commando coming back from Vietnam, trying to be accepted in normal life. And back after the Vietnam veterans were thought of as very, very poorly by the general population, right? And it took them decades to be rehabilitated, okay? So that everyone saw them as war criminals, okay? And while people in the United States Australians are looking at our SAS like that because they have proven themselves to be, unfortunately. But in the United States, I don't think they'll see their military veterans as in those terms, but they will see America in those terms, and that will greatly benefit China in an ideological sense. So China has had a real mixed run with its publicity over the past couple of years. So on the negative side, everybody around the world knows that COVID came from China, right? I don't even know if we can say this on YouTube, probably can. That
Well, they say they have 0 cases, but now they're shutting down cities, saying there's a surge of COVID from 0 cases. Just saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 0. Yeah, they're all immune, and everything that China has done since then has screamed cover up, which has rehabilitated the whole. Like once upon a time, we were not able to say on YouTube that the virus could have come from a lab. Like that was banned. Okay. Now it is expressly unbanned by YouTube. YouTube says, yes, content creators can now talk about this. And so...
But don't deplatform us for 1 week, please.
Yes. So YouTube is on that, has joined the international chorus of kind of condemning China on this issue. Then you've got what's happened in Hong Kong, Uyghurs, Taiwan, all this sort of stuff making people go, China, not the greatest. But where China has still got currency, and the Afghanistan thing will only add to it, is on its effectiveness. Okay. China, after the global financial crisis, came out of it relatively well, right? They had the most effective stimulus package of any country, and the United States massively declined. The pandemic, despite all of the blame being placed on China's shoulders appropriately, and despite all of their cover-ups, most people think that their public health has handled it better than, say, the United States. Okay. Then they've got all of their infrastructure, like things that are happening that are just mind-bogglingly incredible.
Yeah, and their tech industry, investment in AI.
All of that stuff, they're surging in these areas. And so it's not that people like China, but they're more likely to contend with China. And I think for the Chinese perspective, that's enough. So if America goes through yet another, like, okay, we just burned $2.4 trillion. This is on top of the $5 trillion we spent in Iraq. Yeah, we suck. Then and China doesn't spend that kind of money doing that kind of rubbish stuff, then more and more countries will turn to China and be like, okay, maybe China is the future. Now, I don't think that's the case. I think that the Soviet Union overplayed its hand after Vietnam. I think China will do the same in Afghanistan. They forget how reinventive and Phoenix-like the Americans are. Americans do have a great ingenuity that no one else does. It's not for nothing that they got to the moon. But there'll be a period of time, just like there was after Vietnam, where there'll be a crisis of confidence in the United States. And there'll be people in America who may not feel like they're able to stand up to China. Because China is surging at a moment where they have a unique crisis of belief. So I'm worried about the next couple of years. I think Biden is finished. There is no way.
Good try. See you later. No.
Yeah, I mean, given all, like, it's been one disaster after another, and for all of the interference run by the media who have been trying to sing Biden's praises and talk about all his favorite ice cream and things like that, there's just nothing. There's no way. You can't hide this. This is a complete catastrophe.
I don't even know what he's achieved, but then again, like, they don't really.
Well, nothing. I mean, the vaccines all happened under Trump, effectively. The inflation is at an all-time high, and people go, well, how could that happen? And it had nothing to do with Biden. Well, he killed the Keystone Pipeline. He killed all of this, like, business development and infrastructure. So that kicked the business in the teeth. And seems to have all these family corruption scandals. Hunter Biden and all of that's still rolling on. Like, Hunter Biden, he has these little finger paints that he's selling for $500,000 a piece, with all the donors being anonymous. They've got the family scandals, you've got the economic malaise, you've got the weak kind of job recovery, you've got all the critical race theory stuff that's rankling people, the lingering, continued mask lockdown restrictions. Fauci still, after all this time, even though much of the population is vaccinated and so on, that kind of not really getting out of this feeling that's starting to take hold. And now this total military collapse under Biden's watch is, and not to say nothing of the man himself. I mean, people know that he's in mental decline, right? He's a peevish old man who can barely remember anything, who doesn't look like he's in control. And despite the media narrative and all of that stuff, he's clearly out of his depth. He is not equipped to be president of the United States. And he doesn't, and I mentioned this in a previous video, this is even before Afghanistan, he was looking like a Jimmy Carter without Jimmy Carter's appeal. So Jimmy Carter was a president who was there for 4 years until Ronald Reagan washed him away in a massive landslide. Ronald Reagan winning every single state in the United States except for, I think, Minnesota. And Jimmy Carter seemed to fail at everything he tried to do, okay? But at least people liked him. He was a decent man. And that was kind of had a certain appeal at the time because he had Richard Nixon who was effective but corrupt.
Yeah.
And so he was like, yeah, I'm a decent guy trying to do a decent thing and trying to work for the American people. And people kind of understood that. And that's why he's still loved to this day. Never as a president, but as a person, right? Like he's, nearly 100 years old now. He's still building houses for the homeless and stuff. Like people love him, right? And Biden is not that. Biden is a career politician who has always failed at everything. And is wildly, increasingly disliked by some of his own previous base. So I don't think there is any prospect of saving his presidency at this point. And it's a dangerous thing to call that so early in a presidential cycle. He's still got several years left, theoretically. Kamala Harris is even less like than he is. That's the only thing keeping him in power, is that the vice presidential alternative is more despised.
Is she? I don't know.
Oh, she couldn't even get 3% in the, like, she started off as one of the favorites in the presidential elections, and couldn't even get 3% in the Democratic primary. So Democrats hated her, let alone the rest of the country. She has no support. The only reason she was put in the position that she was in is because she's a woman of color, and President Biden promised to put a woman of color as his vice president. And
not someone who can do the job.
Well, she also has like insider power, right? So she was a senator from California and part of the Democratic apparatus. So she just has a lot of power within the party, but not much support. And it's easier to see why. She's not a very nice person. So the Democrats, I think, are leading into the 2022 midterms. This Afghanistan defeat. See, it's not as politically, it's not as bad as it could be, because the Americans were war weary. They're like, why are we still in there after 20 years? It is a good thing we're coming out. Okay. But, scenes of people standing on the rooftop of the embassy being helicoptered away, or scenes where Taliban have captured billions of dollars of high-tech American military equipment, right? Those things are hard to wash away. That is a humiliation.
Yeah.
And Biden will pay the political price for that. Rightly so.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is a good thing. So there's another silver lining. They'll get rid of Biden. 2024 we'll hopefully have a real president and someone who can take to the China challenge with gusto.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, cool. Was there anything else you want to cover? Oh, I did want to circle back actually to the start, was how your idea, instead of taxing billionaires, asking the billionaires to choose a charity in order to...
They can make the charity themselves.
Or make the charity themselves.
Yeah, solve a problem is probably what I would say. So they'd be like... Yeah. Maybe they don't want, they see too much homelessness, or they're worried about mental health, or whatever their thing is.
Yeah.
And they go, okay, I'm going to spend 30% of my wealth to reduce suicide rates from this to this. And then they go about doing that.
Exactly. So if you were a billionaire, what would you invest in if you had that choice to make?
Well, it would depend on the criteria. Okay. So if it was a global scale, I would eliminate rabies in humans, right? Okay. Because I think that is one of the worst diseases, totally flying under the radar. 60,000 people dying, mostly young teenagers, people in the prime of their lives. The death is just terrible, 100% mortality.
Mm.
And there is vaccines for it, but it's expensive. It's multiple shots. It's out of the reach of most people where these places occur.
Mm.
And if we can make 5 vaccines for a disease that had never affected us in human history and distribute that globally throughout the world,
within a year,
we can deal with rabies. That used to be called lysovirus in ancient Greece, right? Rabies being a Latin word that the Romans used for madness. Like this disease has been with us for a long time.
Yeah.
And we could get rid of it. We could get rid of it.
Isn't the solution they vaccinate the bats or something?
There'd be multiple ways. So I think 95% of infections are from dogs.
Oh, okay.
So obviously, all dogs vaccinated, like just eliminate the disease from dogs.
Yeah.
Try and find ways. So yeah, like there would be ways of targeting the animals, but also people. I think that just every human being gets like what I would invest in is I would make the vaccine cheaper, one shot, effective. Like I'd redesign the vaccine because clearly we have the technology and ability to do that in a creative way. With a lot of skills around the world now. We probably have more experts on vaccine production and design that have ever existed in human history just over the last year.
Yeah.
So say, put your minds to this, solve this.
Yeah.
So I would invest in that medical research.
Yeah.
Then once we had a cheap one-shot vaccine, I'd sell it at cost to these countries around the world to give to their populations, and every human being around the world could be vaccinated for basically no money. And that would be my personal contribution to the disease. And I look, I don't know people personally who have died of rabies, but the more I learn about it, the more disturbed I am about it. So that's if it was a global scale.
Yeah.
If it was like a tax policy, and therefore it would have to be
within the country.
Within a country.
Yeah.
I think there's a few things I would do. The gap between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Australians is the greatest gap of any two people within one country anywhere in the world, by a long way as well. So, for example, the average life expectancy for a white American versus a black American is about 3 years. And that's huge on a public health scale, right?
3 years?
3 years.
Oh my God.
The difference,
just because I know the statistics of Australia.
The difference between white and Aboriginal people in Australia is 20 years.
Yeah.
It's so... Now, the reason I would focus on this issue myself if I was a billionaire is because I don't have the ideology, right? So much of Australian politics when it comes to Aboriginal issues is based around whether you are 3 Cheers history or Black Armband history. And what I mean by that, and I'll do a video on this because it's actually, I will definitely do a video on this because it's a big part of Australian culture. The 3 Cheers part history is, we've turned this very difficult, untamed country into one of the most prosperous, successful societies ever in the history of the world. In fact, in 1910, so barely 130 years after colonization, we had the highest living standards on earth, right? So Australia is an amazing success story. European culture on the edge of Asia, unreal, right? And so the 3 Cheers thing is like, and what the 3 Cheers would say is like, yes, Aboriginal people suffered, but you have to compare it to their Stone Age culture. It was it's always like wherever there's been colonization, it's always been tragic for the Indigenous people. It wasn't, particularly bad in this case, blah, blah, blah. And so that they were just, there's an apology for it, right? And then the Black Armband version of history is like, the drink devastated the Aboriginal people and the white people brought all here and enslaved everybody and all massacred everybody. And look, there is truth to all of this, right?
Yeah,
there
is.
So
you'll do a video to explore it. We're just running out of time because I have to be somewhere. Yeah. So I'm going to wrap this up really quickly.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry. You're going to do a video.
I'm almost there.
No, you're not. I can see it in your eyes.
I was almost there. What I was going to say is, I don't have a bone to pick in this. What I care about is I go, this group of people have material disadvantages relative to this group of people. And we could solve this problem practically without the politics. Like, I just don't care about the history that much. Like, I love history, but I just don't get bogged down in this debate. Yeah. I'm like, okay, how can we solve domestic violence rates or suicide rates or substance abuse rates or homelessness rates or incarceration rates with this group of people? And so I would probably focus on that.
Great.
Because I think that the most good can be done.
Yeah. No. Okay, I get that point. Sorry, I had to cut you off there, but we're running out of time. What I would do...
She's making it sound like it's a really important thing.
It is, because... whatever. You're making me look bad, all right? Like, I have things to do, Chrisman. Gosh, you want to see. Anyway, I guess the answer to my question in like 30 seconds is basically freight. So similar to that, helping Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in terms of life expectancy, just improving food insecurity around Australia. Despite us being a great exporter of food, there's lots of people in regional remote communities that do not get enough, and it's just the transport of food. It's so expensive. So it's just some sort of technology in order to transport fresh foods to these rural remote communities and make it last. Actually, would be my technology mention. Anyway, let's wrap up here. And if any questions, any feedback, please let me know. Let us know. Otherwise, stay safe and
ciao for now.